It's good to meet you too. I've seen a lot of your videos, so it's nice to speak to you in person. So I basically have two questions, or three, I guess. So firstly, I took the November LSAT and I was hoping to apply, or like I'm planning to apply for like entry in 2020. I didn't do as well as I hoped in November, and so I'm retaking in January. And so I'm wondering I should um, whether I should apply now and ask universities to hold my application, and whether there would be benefit to doing that, or whether I can just wait until I do the January LSAT and then like dedicate more time to finishing up my materials.
Sure. Yeah. So I don't really see a huge benefit to applying until you have your LSAT score back, because they can't evaluate you until you have that score, and you presumably wouldn't want them to evaluate you without that score. So I would suggest wait, get everything together, get everything ready, and then the second your scores come back, you can hit submit on your application. And in the short term, I would focus on preparing for the January LSAT, but you'll also have a 3-week wait approximately till you get your score back. And so you can spend a lot of that time working on the rest of your application.
Okay, that's kind of what I was thinking, so I'm happy to get confirmation. Thank you. And so then I had some questions too in terms of like my application persona and how I've built my story. So I just wanted to share, I guess, what I'm planning on writing on my personal statements and my diversity statements on YX, and whether I should maybe have a GPA addendum. So should I just like tell you what I want to speak about in each, or?
Yeah, sure. Let's go into each one by one.
Okay. So basically, I'm from Western Sahara. My family is from Western Sahara, and I grew up in Spain, and that's where I went to uni. And so in my personal statement, I speak about this one time when I went to see my family in Mauritania, and there's this it was like this very long trip, and we had to like drive through the deserts and then enter the country. And then I never got my passport stamped upon entry, and so then I couldn't leave the country. And I went to the Spanish consulate seeking help, since I have a Spanish passport, and I was met with like I wasn't helped at all. And the consul said that he should actually take away my passport for like XYZ reasons. And so that made me realize how like helpless one is when you don't have information and you don't have access to justice. And so I kind of use that to like set the tone and to explain what my work experience and my interests have been since, because I'd say the thread that connects everything I've done is increasing people's access to education or like physical space. I was a consultant in the accessibility sector for a year. And so a lot of my experiences are around that. And so that's kind of what I would speak about there. And then for my diversity statement, I grew up in the Basque Country in Spain. I'm not sure you're familiar with the Basque Country.
Yeah, I am.
But okay, cool. So I grew up in a little village that I love, and the community around me was very supportive of ETA, which is a terrorist organization or liberation movement, depending on who you ask. And so I had to go through this, and like some of my teachers were in ETA, and then like subsequently like arrested and imprisoned, and so I had to go through this process of like rethinking what my principles are and how I relate to like violence. And so I kind of want to, in my diversity statement, I kind of speak about how I bring that like diversity of thought, I guess, of having grown up in such a place, which I think it's different to many US cities. And then in the YX, so I spent my year abroad in Boston, and I've since spent a chunk of time in the US as well. And so I kind of, because I feel like as an international applicant, I have to make a strong case about like, why do I want to go to law school in the US? And so I kind of start speaking broadly about like why my experience there was so impactful and what I love about the city, and then like go into detail about like each specific law school. But I kind of like want to use the YX as like an excuse as well to speak about why the US for me, you know? And then I did a master's at Cambridge, and so my GPA for my undergrad is a superior, or like a 3.9. But then for my master's, it's more like a 3.7, and it got translated to an above average. And so, which I think is like a very fair GPA to have. But like during the second term, when my grades went down, there was the longest strike of in the history of England in higher education. And I was really active during the strike, and consequently I missed like all the classes for a whole term. And so that's kind of why my GPA suffered. I'm happy I did, like, I'm happy with my choices. And then one of my reference letters is from the master of the college I was in at Cambridge, and she is a law professor, and I think she speaks to like the actions that I took in the college context. And so I'm wondering whether it'd be worth writing an addendum just to like explain that like I missed all the classes for X, Y, and Z reasons, and that's why my GPA went down. Yeah.
So let's start there.
Yeah, okay.
I just want to handle one thing at a time, because otherwise I have to try and remember everything you just walked through.
Yeah, I know. I told you quite a lot. Yeah.
No, it's great. It's a very impressive, unique background that you have. And I think your layout of how you want to organize explaining it in your application is pretty solid. I like it. So to start with that professor, I think that the master of the college, I think that would be a great person to write you a letter of recommendation. They can provide some context about your time there. I do think that if you missed the classes for an entire semester and that impacted your transcript, that certainly warrants writing an addendum, especially if you can give the context that this was a massive general movement, that it wasn't you personally, to give the context about what was going on in England at the time. So that, to me, that does warrant an addendum. The being of a Basque background, growing up in Spain, having those unique experiences, I think is a great topic for a diversity statement. I might not talk too much about the violence and terrorism side of things, because you don't want to raise any questions about where your background lies or where your loyalties lie or something like that.
So, yeah, I mean, and so I'm happy you bring that up. I guess like the whole point of the statement is saying, like, I grew up in a place where that was very acceptable, and then I had to go through this process of like changing my mind. Like if you grew up thinking the church is great, and then you have to like kind of like give up religion or something from like your own thinking. I think that's like an interesting process, because I feel like if I don't mention that, then there's not much point to the diversity statement. You know what I mean? Like I realize it's tricky, but I'm like not being an apologist or anything, because I am not.
Yeah. So if you can talk about the context of like the evolution of your thought growing up in that context, and how you might have changed your mind or changed your opinions along the way, perhaps with greater exposure to other ideas and being outside the bubble of a very small community.
Okay. But then you'd say like tread carefully so that I don't come off as the wrong thing.
Exactly. Like, you don't want to come across as an apologist, as you said. And then the general topic of travel and the passport, and the international context of being powerless in front of such a vast bureaucracy, I think is a great topic too for a personal statement.
Okay, awesome. I have another question. So for the personal statement, is it okay? So I know we're not meant to like rehash a resume in a narrative form, but like, would it be okay if I speak about some of my experiences to like thread that, to like make those connections as I see them, to like be like, well, I worked around access in this experience and in this experience and blah, 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 or
it's okay to mention them. I just wouldn't go deep on them. I would try to use the anecdote as the place you go the deepest on, and you provide the most detail around the anecdote of potentially having your passport taken and not getting it stamped, and the risks one takes when not doing everything by the book to the letter, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then you can mention other work you've done in passing, but I wouldn't go too deep on that, and trust the resume will be the place to share more on that.
Okay. So then when I was writing the story, because it's quite convoluted, so I was going from, people from where I'm from live in refugee camps in Nigeria. And so I was crossing from there to Mauritania, which is like one of the world's like most dense minefields. And so they don't let you through with a European passport. And so I had this like fake ID that someone had given me and blah, blah, blah. And so it's quite long. And when I first wrote it, it was like 3 or 4 paragraphs. And then I boiled it down to 2. And so, but from what you're saying now, do you think, could I use more of my space for that, or for the story itself?
Well, if you say the story is convoluted, that makes me a little bit concerned that it could be hard for someone to follow when they're reading these very quickly. So if there's a way that you can boil it down in terms of removing some of the unnecessary details that are not essential to your theme, whereas so that your final draft may not be a literal recounting of every single thing that happened, but rather a sort of simplified and summarized version, just so they get the main gist of what you're getting at.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's what I kind of achieved with the 2 paragraphs. But now when you said that I should go into more detail there, I was wondering whether I should like take a different approach to what I had. Okay, cool. I'm just trying to be mindful of time. I'm wondering, so I'm an international applicant, and there isn't much out there for us. And so I'm wondering if you have any advice for international applicants in general. My intention is to move to the US and stay there. And I have a focus on public interest only. I'm like PI or bust. And so I wonder whether you have any advice for someone like me.
Just make it clear on your application, as you said, that your YX statement will also talk a little bit about why you want to go to the US, why you want to practice in the US. If you make that clear on some part of your application, that will answer an important question for admissions. And the other thing is that they can't always evaluate your overseas transcript thoroughly because it's a different system. And so that places more importance on the LSAT score. And so do everything you can to knock the January LSAT out of the park, because that's going to matter more.
I know.
I know.
Yes. Okay. Cool. Wonderful. Thank you. I really have seen many of your videos, so it's really funny to be speaking with you directly.
No, it's nice to finally meet you as well. I've seen you've been very active in the Facebook group, so it's good to meet you too. Before we sign off, what would you say is the biggest insight you got from our call today?
I think like getting confirmation or like validation about how it's like spread out my story, because I think there's like many aspects of my life that could be interesting, and so I feel like having validation on how I've split it into like the different application materials, and then having confirmation about like writing the GPA addendum for my master's, that was really useful and has like put me at ease. And then also the fact that what you mentioned about like don't bother applying now, like focus on the LSAT and then apply after those. I mean, it was all very useful, to be honest.
Great. Well, please keep in touch and let me know if I can help in any way as you move forward.
Okay. Thank you so much. I will. Thanks. Bye, Steve. Have a good day.
Bye. You too. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.